Let's start right now. Boris Moisten, Black Men Talk Tech. I have the pleasure of introducing Shu Nyatta from SoftBank. Shu, did I get that right? Help me with the enunciation there.
99%. It's all good.
What intonation was I missing?
You were just trying a little too hard.
You were something else. Oh, that's great, man. Well, hey, Shu, listen, thank you for joining us here today. I've read about you, seen a bunch of your videos. Just proud to have a brother like you doing a lot of good work at a major investment firm. And, hopefully for this event, we could talk a little bit about who you are, about your journey, about SoftBank, about what SoftBank stands for, and the Opportunity Fund, I think, which is what everyone wants to hear about. After having my first conversation with you, and after reading up a lot more on SoftBank, I think I was just pleasantly surprised, actually inspired, just figuring out what you guys are really about, because I think there's a lot of misconception out there. So I'm happy to hop into it, and to kick it off, we're going to start with you. Looking at your background, man, you look like a guy that's like made in a laboratory, right? You're the gold standard by any means. Oxford Rhodes Scholar, Harvard grad, McKinsey consultant, JP Morgan investment banker, managing partner at SoftBank, and you are an artist. I've listened to you sing, and you got a voice. What drives you, or how did you get to where you are now? Were you like an entitled kid from Andover, Massachusetts, or what got you to where you are today?
First of all, that resume used to be described as scattered and inconsistent. So there are many ways to look at it. No, I was not born in the U.S. I was born in Nairobi, Kenya. Two parents, one worked in government, one worked at UNICEF. Nothing fancy at all. Went to public schools. Had an older sister. Very straight down the middle Nairobi childhood, which compared to the US is pretty bare bones. And the thing that happened that really changed my life was getting into Harvard, which was, one of these events that you never really think will happen. If you grow up in Nairobi, I like to tell people, because I think a lot of immigrants respond to this, and a lot of people in the US, actually, depending on where you come from, respond to this. What you're trying to do most of your life is get out of it, get out of that place that you are in. And so the first, 12 years of my schooling were, how do I figure out a way to get out of here? And that was the late 90s. So Nairobi, I think, has come a long way now. Off-brand Nikes were what people wore. There weren't even real Nikes. It was like Nike with like an I at the end, type of thing. That was Nairobi in the 90s. And so you just wanted to find a better life for yourself. And a few people from my school had gone to schools in the US. A couple had gone to Ivy League schools in the past. So there was a bit of a reputation that you could get kids out of this school in the middle of Nairobi, in the middle of Kenya, and they wouldn't fail.
Yeah.
And I benefited from that, right? And so I got into Harvard, and that was it. That changed my whole life, because it opened up the world. It was a paradise. The amount of resources available for whatever it is you want to do was inconceivable to me. Inconceivable. I'd walk around the Harvard yard, even 2 years in, and look around and be like, is this a joke? Like, how is this a school? And so I think what it is I just took advantage of it. If I had come from Andover, I would have thought this is just Andover College.
Right.
I thought it was Paradise College. And so I worked my butt off, tried to do right by all the people many thousands of miles away who had made sacrifices to send me to Harvard. Showed up with 2 suitcases, like it was just the classic immigrant story. It's nothing special, actually. There were a lot of kids like me, and we all just wanted to do right by the people who had sent us there. And the reason the resume is so scattered and inconsistent, I had no idea who I was, what I cared about, what I was truly about, because
Right.
you're not allowed to ask that question if you're in Nairobi trying to achieve and get out. It's a luxury question. Who am I about? What do I care about? What truly drives me? It doesn't matter. Nobody cares. And so graduating college with an economics degree was what every good East African does. I think the Nigerians tend to do pre-med more. I don't know,
Pre-med,
but
engineering.
yeah, Kenyans are a lot of economics and Hedapo and went to McKinsey because that's what you do if you can, right? And I hated it. It was just this weird dystopian. Imagine you come from this Spartan hardscrabble boarding school in Kenya, like hardscrabble, and then you go to Harvard and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. The world is going to be amazing. And then 4 years later, you're in a cubicle doing
Great
power,
cubicle.
doing like a no crappy cubicle. You know, this was right after the dot-com bust, so like the walls hadn't been redone in 10 years. Crappy cubicle making PowerPoint. You wonder, wait, is this what this all turns into? It can't be true. And so I was really quite disheartened by that first experience of being a consultant producing PowerPoint, and had an itch left to scratch. So I applied. Someone advised me to just take a flyer and apply for the roads. And I did, not really expecting to get in, because truly that is a crapshoot. It is like, is
That is
the way
ultra competitive.
the way the class is constructed, and like if there are too many violinists, are you the like oboe player? Because if you're the oboe player that year, it works out. The next year there are too many oboe players, you don't. So it's really a crapshoot. And one of the luckiest things that ever happened to me, and I got it, and that was my chance to start asking myself what I cared about. It gave me the freedom to do that. Someone else paying the bills. I'm in this place far away. Nobody knows me at Oxford. I just get to explore. And I studied contemporary African art. I spent time in London, which has much more of an African diaspora and that whole vibe. But you start to see yourself a little more. And I decided, you know what, this music thing has been in my life for my whole life, but I've never really spent proper investment time in it, and I'm going to do that now. So after Oxford, was a full-time musician for a few years in New York and traveling and all the usual indie music grind, which is not glamorous. I mean, it sounds cool, but when in your early 20s, it's fun, but it's not glamorous. It's a lot of waiting
Right.
around, a lot of ramen noodles, a lot of disrespect, and these moments of real joy. So it was great to just kind of do that and get it out of my system and learn about myself. And then I went back to McKinsey because it was an easy way back into the professional world. I had a mentor there who said, come back, you're broke, you're tired of being broke, I'm sure. You can start on Monday. This was a Friday. We were just catching up for lunch. Start on Monday and you can work on what you want to work on. It's a different time. It's boom time. We have a lot of stuff going on. You can work with me. And so I did that. And again, that changed my perspective immensely, because I realized that when you come into something with intention instead of just following the crowd, because it's what you're supposed to do, when you come to it with intention, it's a very different experience. So I came back to McKinsey with intention and did the type of things that I thought were really interesting, ended up getting shipped off to Dubai. And I thought, oh my God, this is paradise. Americans hate on Dubai. I came from Nairobi, and my first reaction was, why didn't we do this? Like, what's so special about these guys in a desert that they built a metropolis in 30 years? Like, why didn't we do
Beautiful.
this?
Yeah.
Why didn't we do that? What's wrong with us? So I was really curious to understand, like, what led to creating a mega city in the middle of the desert. And so I moved to Dubai. I left McKinsey. I moved to Dubai. I helped build a media company in Saudi Arabia. And that, I think, is when I finally, like 2 years into that, I was standing, I remember vividly, it was like summer, 110 degrees. I was standing at 5 p.m. right outside this drab building, being like, what am I doing with my life? This isn't it. I'm in the wrong place. I keep getting job offers for more like Dubai stuff.
Right.
That's not what I want to do. I keep getting job offers for, you want to build another media company in an emerging market? That's not what I want to do. What do I want to do? And that's when it dawned on me that I'm missing the boat, and the boat is tech. And tech is the zeitgeist. Like, it's not going anywhere. And it's going to be this force for decades that just creates opportunity and value. And I'm like, well, I need to be in San Francisco. That's the headquarters of tech.
So far, Dreamer from Nairobi capitalizes on opportunities of excellence. right? Yeah, McKinsey, got Oxford, end up in the Middle East, and then you start to get the long-term vision now, right, of what's going on, and you're reflecting on yourself, and you're trying to find some purpose. The information revolution is coming, and now you're heading to San Francisco.
Yeah, and it sounds easy. I mean, heading to let me go to San Francisco. It took me let me go
Wait,
to
wait,
San
wait.
Francisco and
You
be an
had nothing
investor.
really set up. You just headed to say you just went, right?
I know. Well, I knew I had to be. So I passed through New York. JP Morgan gave me a job in New York. I had some relationships there from McKinsey. There's a common thread, which is relationships come back and back and back and back and back. It's a very small world in that way.
Right.
And so someone gave me a chance. Said, "Come to New York. We'll figure out how we can get you to San Francisco through JP Morgan." I was like, "All right." And that was the one yes. I'd gotten like 1,000. Goldman said no. Morgan Stanley said no. You name it. Everybody said no. You haven't been a banker. Sorry, you can't do it. You're in Dubai. You haven't been a banker. Like, sorry. And this was 2009, 2010. So coming out of the crisis, it's not like people were taking chances on people.
Right.
So one person said, "Okay, sure, we'll try." And then one other person said, "Yeah, come to San Francisco, but you have to grind it out just like everyone else. It doesn't matter how old you are, what kind of experience you are. I'm going to make you an associate in the investment bank." I was like, "Cool, sign me up." And so I did that. And those acts of faith were what enabled everything. And so at JP Morgan, I met the SoftBank team that was just starting to set up in the Valley. And that's how I got into tech investing, essentially by doing things other people were not willing to do or didn't want to do.
So now we get to the transition to how you connected with SoftBank. So when I think SoftBank, I think mega huge VC. I think elitist platform. How were you able to get a role on that platform at that time?
Because it wasn't that when I joined. It was, who's this kooky Japanese guy who runs a telco in Japan, and what does he want to do in Silicon Valley? And like nobody wanted the job, basically. That's
Right.
an exaggeration, but it wasn't some sexy. It wasn't like come work at Sequoia.
Right.
There's a
Right.
line. There's a line around the block for that job.
Yeah.
This was like, I don't know. It's kind of weird, but to me it appealed. I mean, if I think about all the big decisions I've made, it's essentially been: do you want to do what everyone else is doing, or do you want to do something different? And what I realized is, if you're always doing what other people are doing, basically you're just opening another restaurant on the main street. And we all know that's a shitty business. Opening another restaurant on the main street is a shitty business. But
Thin margins, man.
that's what you're doing when you're doing what everyone else is doing. You're essentially competing away to the marginal cost of capital. You're just entering this perfect competitive zone. And so I would always decide I'm just going to do something different. And different should extract supernormal profits over time. Different should be sustainably interesting to somebody somewhere. It should create more option value than just being another one of X. And so that's why I took the leap, because Masa is a bold thinker. He was going to try a bunch of new stuff. He was going to just let me travel around and make a bunch of investments in India and China and the US with no experience. And someone who was willing to do that for me, I was excited to be a part of, right? So that was my entry into global tech investing. And 6 years later, I've been through all kinds of journeys at SoftBank, including the notorious ones and then the less notorious ones and all in between. And the brand has gone up and down and all of this stuff. But what SoftBank really has been for me, and I think is this platform with an ambitious, inspired guy at the top who does all kinds of crazy stuff at big scale, super visibly, and doesn't care what people think.
And let me get to that for a second, right? So now I'm thinking, talking to you for the first time and having all the stuff in my head from the third party media, thinking reclusive institution, elitist. But then I meet you and your team, and it wasn't what I was expecting. It was a diverse team, a team filled with women, a team filled with people of color. And I'm like, all right, I guess this is SoftBank. And after that call, I was like, let me do some research. I don't know why I didn't do research before speaking with them. And I learned that SoftBank was really about the in the values and philosophy I just couldn't put together either. It was like creating happiness and inspiration. It was about serving people and doing that all in the context of the information revolution. And you're getting into that though, but it didn't feel like the traditional exclusive, not that you're not exclusive because you are, but it didn't feel like the traditional path of a VC. You're distinctly different. And
So
that
there,
stood out.
yeah, there's a really important point there, which is Masa. I mean, people think of Masa. If you know him, Masa is he's the CEO of SoftBank. He's become
Japanese.
a, yeah, no, well, yes, but Korean, and that's very important to know because ethnic Koreans in Japan are hugely discriminated against. I mean, Japan colonized Korea.
A lot of
The
history there.
the Nigerian in London is like the Korean in Japan. The
Yeah.
Japanese colonized Korea, thought they were inferior people. To everyone outside of Japan, they're like, oh, he's Japanese because we think Asian people look the same. So we're at fault. He's not. He's Korean, and that's a really important fact. He was
Shit,
not
I've been thinking
accepted.
Masa-san Japanese right from the get-go, but I guess I guess I'm sort of racist then. I guess I got to fix
Yeah,
that.
you're
I,
racist.
I
Yeah,
am. I am. Like, oh,
you're the problem.
I am the problem. He
But
completely
by the way,
isn't.
my daughter is screaming. There's nothing I can do about it. So we're all just gonna have to live with it.
Small
She's
price to
somewhere
pay.
else, but she screams really loud. Sorry, sorry
No,
everybody.
that's fine. We all have
Yeah,
kids.
so Masa built this business against all odds. You know, he spoke weird English. He came to Berkeley, but like was this weird outsider. And he went back to Japan and said, "I'm just going to build a bank for software, literally software, shrink wrap software in boxes in a store, because that's what was happening then. Is a lot of software distribution. Is I'll call it SoftBank because it'll have all this software in one place." And that was the beginning. You know, like 40 years ago. And he kept chasing the next secular trend and breaking the rules in Japan. And in Japan, rules are the country, like it's how you operate. But he was the rule breaker. And so SoftBank has always been this underdog. And it's probably the biggest underdog in the world right now. But it still has that idea of we're not accepted in the major club. So we're just going to go do our own thing. We'll change the rules. We'll overinvest. We'll like raise 100 billion from the Saudis. And all of Silicon Valley was very upset about that because someone came in and started to mess around with their playground. But to put it politely, fuck it.
And I'm thinking now, like, it never occurred to me until after meeting you and hearing the story. Your leaders are sort of like, you all should have some sort of imposter syndrome as VCs globally, right? Because Masa is this Korean Japanese guy, right? Marcelo is like a Latino, I believe.
Yeah, from
You're
Bolivia,
from Bolivia.
which nobody can place on a map. Like Bolivia is one of these places nobody knows where it is.
And then you're from, Nairobi. And I believe you probably started with the Vision Fund with Rajiv, right? So so you guys are really on the
It,
outside a little bit.
yeah, and we have made a lot of mistakes, but we really are truly a band of outsiders. And what happens when you can't get in the clubs that everyone is holding the velvet rope to is you try to figure something else out. And and we did it perhaps sometimes awkwardly and with too much capital and all that stuff. But the true north is actually fairly pure, believe it or not. Masa wants to change the world with tech and make it a better place. Simple as that. And he thinks the only way you do that is with a lot of money. And some decisions around how much to pay and who to give it to and all of that were wrong. But the true north remains. And by the way, he hasn't changed anything about his philosophy over the last 2 years with everybody shitting on SoftBank. And I respect him for it. And so for me, it's a very special place. And the opportunity I got a couple of years ago was to launch our Latin America fund. Why? Because there was nobody investing in growth, tech growth in LATAM. And again, you can either do what everyone else is doing or do something different. and where there's something different, there's money to be made. And so we went to Latin America, we set up a fund. It's been running for almost 2 years now. It's doing quite well, and there's nobody else providing capital to the region in a sustainable way, and there are great companies being built there. Opportunity Fund is a continuation of that. There are all these Black and brown founders in the US, and everybody keeps talking about pipeline problem, and everyone keeps talking about mentorship, and why don't we just try something and put some money to work and try to make it work? And what we've discovered is hundreds of founders. There's no pipeline problem. So we launched the Opportunity Fund in June, so that's 4 months ago. We've made 21 investments since June.
And let's talk about, like, I mean, I remember what it was like to be at a major corporation when there was a lot of social unrest, particularly around race. What was it like at SoftBank when all this stuff was going on, and what made you guys like sit back? If you could take us into the room, how did that go down? Because I gotta be honest, like, that's another legendary move, right? Like, I don't see a traditional big VC fund saying, "Oh, let's go to Latin America. Oh, let's create this big fund and bet on, how to find and invest in Black, Hispanic, and Native American founders." How did that happen at SoftBank?
Marcelo, who's my boss, who works for Masa, he's like one of the two guys under Masa. There's Rajiv, who runs the Vision Fund, and there's Marcelo, who runs everything else, basically. And Marcelo is an entrepreneur at heart. And he's this Bolivian guy who scrappily built like a cell phone distribution business.
Brightstar out of Miami.
Yeah, buy low, sell high. Simple business. Like, that was his business. So he really gets hustle. And he's just this creative entrepreneur who sees SoftBank as a platform that you can kind of dance on and do interesting things on. And I completely share that philosophy. And so I helped launch Latin America with him. And he was thinking about what was happening in the US and felt it very personally because he's Latino. And he and I have talked about it a couple of times. And he said, we can't just do a press release. That's just lame. It's just
everyone was doing a press release or some like social media share.
Yeah. And he just wasn't and so he said on a Monday, we just need to invest. Like, that's the only way to actually do something meaningful. And it can't be some crazy big number because it has to be successful. So we have to walk and then run. And so what's a good number for an early stage fund that kind of gets things going? $100 million. Great. Okay. So this was Monday night. He said, okay, I'm going to go on CNBC on Wednesday and announce it. Can you figure out the details? and so Wednesday.
So we'll pause there. Hold on, we pause there, right? So like, and this is what the Black tech and investing community was saying. All these corporate companies are coming out with their statements, and as you start to dig into like what their little investment funds, you had, Andreessen Horowitz at their $2 million thing and all the other, right? Like, they're not really doing, much, or they're investing in like, nonprofits that want to invest in the ecosystem. Like, oh, here comes SoftBank, their $100 million fund. Like, who are they going to give that money? They're going to give it to like a government organization or another nonprofit. It's not going to get to a Black founder or a Latino founder or a Native American founder. I was like, that would be too revolutionary for someone to do. And it's exactly what you guys are doing. So he announced it on Monday, and I guess you're like, I guess your brand within SoftBank is launching new initiatives. So you,
yeah, I think that's right. It's kind of get it done. Go figure it out. And Marcelo's as well. And I enjoy that. It's fun, right? It's just a more fun existence to do new stuff. And so Monday to Wednesday, yeah. And what you're saying is interesting. In a sense, we have an unfair advantage at SoftBank because we don't have a competing early stage fund. The Vision Fund was $100 million checks and higher. We didn't have any sub $100 million thing in the US at all. And so it was very easy for us to say, let's launch this. It doesn't compete with anything, go. I do have sympathy for Sequoia, let's say,
right?
Who, like, what are they going to do? They can't launch a sister early stage fund just for Black people, because then that's the kids table. Why are you setting up a kids table? Just bring people to the adults table. And so they struggle with that conflict, and I'm sure they talk about it and all this stuff. And the reaction to the Sequoias of the world is, sure, get more Black founders in your main fund. Because if you do anything else, it's less than. we don't have the less than problem, which is an advantage. I think any big growth fund or big corps have that same advantage. And so our template probably doesn't work as well for an existing early stage fund, but it would work well for a, I don't know, large corporate or large investment firm. And what we've discovered is these entrepreneurs are everywhere in doing everything. Like they're not just doing black startups, they're not just doing something that is obviously related to the color of your skin. Like, I don't know what a good example is. Providing light to the projects. It's not stupid, obvious stuff. It is real entrepreneurship, real ingenuity, everything from 3D avatars for next gen media creation to healthcare to e-commerce. I mean, you name it. And when we looked at this pipeline, we were blown away. And so, as I mentioned, we have 21 companies, but more than 21 founders of color that we've put money directly into the hands of. And some of those they've kind of made it through the media filter and are more well known, but that's okay because we can't ignore those founders. I mean, we want a balance of people who've crossed the chasm, people who haven't. It's really about creating a community of excellence.
Right.
And excellence is the key word, but some folks have to be passed over and some folks have to be already well known. That's okay. Well, that balance I think is important to have. But we've easily found, I think it's like 24, 25 founders who fit the profile in 4 months without trying very hard. We just put up our shingle.
Right.
And so I challenge anyone who says there's a pipeline problem to show me the data.
I do have to say, and you were touching on this earlier, that like after just hearing about how you're trying to catalyze change, right, and invest in these people and let everyone know if we could find them, you can find them too. But like, I sort of feel that you're like your team. You guys are like the Jackie Robinson of venture investing, right? You're getting people of color in. You're doing for a lot of these guys, they're going to Latin America, like right? They're investing in blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, right? So like, I remember hanging up the phone the first time and like, holy shit, we really need these guys to succeed. Like we need them to win, and it's just like that. It's like this unfair feeling that like you have no room to fail, which isn't right. And like black founders can't fail because if they fail, it's the only. It doesn't look right for everyone because we represent the race. How are you guys managing and coping with that? And more importantly, like how are your founders dealing with it?
It's such an interesting point. I mean, the reason W.B. Du Bois and James Baldwin and Jimi Hendrix went to Europe is to get away from the burden of blackness and just have a chance to be writers and artists.
Preach. I hear that.
And you do carry more than your individual self every time you're doing something. And you could call it a burden, but it's more of it's like an obligation.
Responsibility, yeah.
And there's a nice part to that because we're confident that these founders exist. And it's a chance to show the world. I mean, the other way I put it often is we're not here to play in the D League. Right? The point is to play in the big games. And so bring on the burden. Let's go. Like, come on. It's fine. We'll deal with it. It's all good. We're happy to try and succeed in public. And the way we get our heads around that every day is we just do the work. And there's no substitute. It's not about going on Twitter and building a brand. It's not, you just find the founders and invest in them. It's like actually a very straightforward job.
Well,
Find
you think
founders.
about it, listen, but the thing is, when you're cutting like checks that are tens of millions or hundreds of millions or even billions in size, you don't really need a big team to do that. And this is crazy work for you to do because this is $100 million fund, and it's not like you have a large team. Like your team's probably half a dozen or so, right? This is hard. This is hard work.
Yeah. Well, there's another advantage we have. If you were just a random $100 million fund, it is very hard to have a budget to hire that many people.
Mm-hmm.
It is very hard to have any kind of media presence. It is very hard to provide any kind of value once you invest. Fortunately, we don't have any of those problems because I'm working for the fund for free. Several people are working for the fund for free, so to speak. We have a few people who are being paid for by the AUM of the fund, but
Mm-hmm.
it's okay. That's just a small handful. And then we have the media presence because of SoftBank and because of Marcelo. And we have all of this post-investment value creation capability because that's been built for $100 billion fund.
Right.
And so the key is how do you just make that work for the companies? So we can't take board seats on all these companies where we put $100,000 in. What we can do, however, is make sure there's a good partner fund at the table who will do some of that real early stage co-founder type work. Because if you're an early stage investor, you're really kind of a co-founder.
Yep.
We want other people around the table who are doing that work. And then we'll focus on all the infrastructure that SoftBank provides that could add real tangible value. So product discovery, if you're building this is a real example. There's a company that's building a product for CHROs, for the benefits organizations in companies. We organized a conversation between that founder and a whole lot of CHROs to iterate on product, to find product market fit. Very easy to do because we had access to those CHROs. So that kind of thing, that tangible benefit,
Adding value.
real business connections.
Right.
If we can scale that and make it essentially a service that's available in a fairly low touch way, then we can add value without doing this hand-to-hand combat that a tiny boutique $100 million fund would be doing. So that's the opportunity that we need to figure out how to attack, but it's there for us to figure out.
Yeah. And we have just over 5 minutes left. There are some questions that were in the chat that I want to get to. But if you guys in the chat feel as if this has been inspirational, type, inspired in the chat, and while we're doing that, some of the questions was about what are you guys looking for? How much are you investing? In terms of size of the checks and sort of, I don't know if what your thesis is the right question. How do they,
thesis,
get in touch?
So we'll launch our new website, I think this week. But for now, the URL is the same. You can just go to theopportunityfund.com, truly, and we look at all of these submissions. The reason we do it through the website is because you actually have to put in information. It's better than send an email and then we say, could you please send this information? And then you send another email. There's this very straightforward form on the website, theopportunityfund.com, and you put in details about your company, and we look at all of them. So again, we've looked at 800 or so companies, and we've invested in 21. We're investing. We're not ignoring these. Our job is to put this capital in your hands. So that's how to get in touch. But in terms of what we're looking for, so one of the things that's not talked about a lot, minority founders or any kind of outsider founders are awesome founders because they have all the things that Silicon Valley apparently likes. You're an outsider. You've had to struggle to get where you are. You bring a lot of grit to the table. Like, that is a great founder. So we don't even need to solve for that. You bring that with your color. That came with you every day you walked down the street and tried to raise money and tried to go to wherever you went to school and all that stuff. You come pre-prepared to be an entrepreneur. So in a sense, from a personality point of view, this pipeline is way better on average than the Andover grad who just expects, a startup is a cool thing to do. I can get money from friends and family. I'll go do that. That will fail in 2 years. But the black founder cannot fail in 2 years. So they'll find a way. They'll be EBITDA, they'll be cash flow positive.
That's the type of entrepreneur you want, the person who has to make money, right?
It has to work.
It has to work.
Yeah. So that's great. And in a sense, we have to worry about that less. The thing that we'd like to be able to do is give people permission to think bigger than that. So permission to really invest in trying to solve a problem that is meaningful, try to solve it in a distinctive way, try to invest in dreaming. So if we can give people with those inherent characteristics the ability to dream a little more, go a little bigger, that should do the trick. Really, I truly believe that.
Well, I got to tell you, again, I don't know if you're playing Jedi mind tricks with me, man, but I get inspired and fired up every time I talk to you. The guys in the chat, I don't know if you were paying attention. We have 151 points of engagement. Those guys are getting inspired. We love what you do. And we just gotta, thank you for being with us today, and thank you for, giving these awesome words of inspiration. And it's like, and it's your job. So, my outlook, I think all of our outlook for the future is amazing. I'm just thinking about all the different types of pressure you could put on the ecosystem, right? There are other funds like downstream, upstream, who are now saying, a lot of them, and I've gotten the emails, hey, we want to invest in more companies led by people of color. Now they have the opportunity fund to exit to. And I think the larger funds looking down at the opportunity fund, I'm certain they're going to be looking to you to find companies that they can invest in that you could, exit out of. So that is just what you're doing to the pressure you're putting on the ecosystem is inspiring as well. Do we have any?
Hopefully.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say one thing that's really important. 100 million should be the start. So our job in the next couple of years is to show that with $100 million fund that looks completely black and brown, you can have a top quartile fund. That's our only job. If we do that, then you raise more money. Then you have a bigger fund. Then everything else. If you don't do that, forget it all, kind of, like you start back again to prove that point. And so we see our job as very, very simple, is prove the point. That's it. And if we can do that, I think we'll have made a very good contribution to this whole discussion, this whole conversation.
And that's an amazing sort of goal to have, man. Shu, thank you so much for being with us, for making the time. I feel as if we should cut you a big check just for, showing up. It was amazing.
Find LPs. Find LPs for us.
Well, I'm going to be marketing.
The next one.
Everyone, the opportunityfund.com, is that where we head to?
Yeah. Somehow we got that URL. I don't know how. Theopportunityfund.com. Theopporunityfund.com. Yeah. Insane. And you're going to be launching the new website shortly, I take it. We'll tweet it out and stuff. Yeah, it should come out soon, and we'll talk about a few of our founders. We wanted to wait until we had something more to say than here's our site.
Hey, so you're a legend in my book, man. I love your work.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.